knowledge is power.
It's Kat and I'm back because what once was will be again. I got my thinking cap on so we can use history and mythology and astrology and some feminist ideology to divine the mysteries of the Game of Thrones. And we're going to talk about who is Lightbringer. And that's right, I said who. Not what, not which sword, but who. And I'll start off right off the bat and tell you that Lightbringer is a woman. So how do we know that Lightbringer is a woman? And I know everybody's got their theories, right? And some have actually come to the right conclusion about not only is it a woman, but probably who it is. You know, Daenerys, because the Lightbringer is fire and warm, etc., etc. And that's Daenerys with her dragons. And by the way, fire brings light. So that's a good way to get to it. But in fact, our program and this book have been leading you to it the entire time. And the series on television, The Game of Thrones, actually has put it in your face so many times. It's hard to miss. But like the characters on the story, sometimes the audience can't see the forest for the trees. Now, before I totally rock this down, I'm going to give a shout out to the dudes over at Westeros History. Not that they informed my opinion about that it was a woman, because I already had this idea that Lightbringer was a woman. But in watching their video that was recorded probably about 6 months ago, and they were discussing how they were going to figure out which sword was Lightbringer, it really prompted me to put out this message, to be the messenger. Now, on their video, they were discussing about how astrological events or things that happen in the sky were interpreted by men to mean certain things. Like, for instance, that a red comet shooting across the sky could in fact be a dragon, or that a meteor falling to the earth might be considered a moon star. So these are very true. And they were talking about how maybe a moon star created the dawn, blah, blah, blah. And this one gentleman on the video, and I'll put the link in so you can see what he had to say. He goes by the nom de guerre of Lucifer means Lightbringer. And he's right. Lucifer does mean Lightbringer. And so he talked about how Lucifer was the Latin name for the star Venus. It just meant bright light. Somehow, as time went on, it became Lucifer and Satan. And I'll tell you why. Because Lucifer, the star, is Venus. And Venus is the morning star. And if you've read the Bible or had any referential information towards it, Lucifer is often called the morning star. But in fact, interestingly enough, Jesus was referred to as the morning star in the New Testament. Well, let's talk about how Lucifer got to be the morning star. First of all, Venus as the morning star is because in one aspect of Venus, so there's two aspects as Venus travels, as Lucifer the Lightbringer talked about in his little video, and that is that in one aspect, Venus rises before the sun. And so in mythology, Greek and Roman, for instance, and probably some others, Venus was seen as the light bringer. Because when Venus rose, the sun came. Thus did Venus be the light bringer. And in some mythology, like Greek mythology, for instance, Aphrodite, or Venus in the Roman pantheon, was the morning star. And Apollo was the charioteer who took the sun across the sky. And he was always chasing after Aphrodite. It's in Greek mythology. He was always chasing Venus, okay? So Venus is the light bringer. And Venus was a woman. Now, in biblical information, and Lucifer, the Latin word, Lucifer has been interpreted as a guy. But back in the day, when they were writing the Bible, early on, some of these scriptures, you know, there was a tad bit of misogyny going on. Peter, as he was forming the church, was not digging the females as, you know, messengers or apostles. And he had been one that during Jesus's time was, you know, unhappy about Mary Magdalene being in their group. Go figure. So as they were putting this together and they were telling the story of Adam and Eve, you know, Eve sort of became Lilith, sort of became Venus in the Roman pantheon, who was that morning star. And as we know the story of Adam and Eve, Eve tempted Adam to eat the apple from the tree and gain knowledge and, you know, were born into sin. Just as Lucifer is the one who who tempts people into sin. Women do the same. Get it? Got it? Okay, good. So, and remember that originally when the Bible was written, Lucifer was not actually given a gender. Lucifer was just referred to as the most beautiful angel in the heavens. And then he fell. And we later made him the male aspect of the beauty that fell. But it was really sort of an allegory for women because, you know, why did Lucifer fall? Because Lucifer tried to take over heaven and kick God out. And God was the male aspect. So this is about the women taking over, taking over the dudes. All right, so now you know how Venus became Lucifer, and Lucifer means Lightbringer because it's Venus, the star, that rises first and brings the sun with it. Now let's talk about how you know in the show what symbols that we can decode that tell you that this is in fact what's going on. Well, it is that 7-pointed star in a circle that's rising above the Iron Throne. The 7-pointed star in a circle is historically and religiously, mythologically, the sign of Venus and many other goddesses, including Inanna, Ishtar, Astarte. Isis might have had an 8-pointed star, but it's still the Venus star, and so forth. And in fact, as Christianity grew, the 7-pointed star in a circle became associated with Mary, Mother of Jesus, the Queen of Heavens. So, the Lightbringer is the star Venus because it causes the sun to rise. The sun chases the star. It's the Lightbringer. And mythologically, religiously, it's a woman. It's the sign of the female aspect of God. I know. What about the sword? Well, I imagine that there's a sword involved, and in fact, that there may be 12 swords from the major houses, like the Arthurian legend of the 12 swords around the round table, and King Arthur with his one special one, so 13 in total, which also invokes the idea of the 12 apostles and Jesus Christ. Oops. Dang, does that mean that there's one who will be the betrayer? Who's the Judas? So, but how does this work out in this theory of Venus rising? Venus rising is clearly been shown over and over again in the throne room over the throne of swords. And if you know anything about symbology, the sword is the symbol for the male, for some obvious reasons. And I know there's some people out there going, no, but you don't know that yet because you haven't, Mr. Martin hasn't written the whole book, and the canon says that Azor Ahai is the prince that was promised, and he pulls a sword from the fire. Well, he might be pulling something from the fire. But I have to say that I'm about to blaspheme, so you might want to turn this down. Paraphrasing Tyrion, fuck the canon. Pay attention to what he's telling you in symbols. That, yeah, there's probably a sword. There's probably 12 plus 1. And there's probably a guy. But there's also a woman because Venus is rising over the throne of the swords. The throne of men. Okay? So how else do you know what this actually means? Because the reality is, the story is Azor Ahai comes, it's the prince that was promised, and he pulls a sword from the fire. And we all know how stories get told over time and get passed down, and the mist of time blurs the edges and parts of the story people don't remember. And this is why the story becomes one dude whose name is Azor Ahai, who's got a sword, a flaming sword, who in the past, like, shoved it in his wife's heart. Her pure heart, and her blood made it red, and her soul made it fiery hot, or something of that nature. So these are all allegories. This is what happens. You tell the story over time. These are allegories for actual events that become mixed up. And if you catch my video about Azor Ahai, that Azor Ahai in real history was two different people, and that throughout the show, everybody's been acting as Azor, God's helper, and Ahai, sages. There may in fact be two people that come to the fore and become Azor and Ahai, but I'm fairly certain, or maybe even together, they represent the one, but that's what it is. It's God's helper who's a sage, if it's one. But the story of the sword has just been amalgamated with all of the other aspects. And the sword is the male aspect, and the Lightbringer is Venus rising. It's the female. It's in the throne room. Next video, I will tell you some other hidden symbology in this awesome story that Mr. Martin has written. Because it's an allegory, and it's a million things to a million people because he's written it so well. But we have to pay attention to more than just the written word. So thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed this video. I'll talk to you later.
Knowledge.